Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have Katie here with us today. She's an author, a speaker. She works in the tech field. She teaches. She does everything. Katie, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Tony. I appreciate it.
So I love to start by thinking about the big picture. And
hmm
um, one of the questions I love to ask people is how they would define their call. So if you think about all the things that you do, how would you define what God has called you to in the world?
Okay, it's so funny. I remember being very young and being very confused about my calling and believing that my calling was preaching because that was the only thing I saw done in the church. And
Mm,
so, but I'm not like a shepherd teacher. Like I'm definitely the apostle, prophet, evangelist. Like, there's all these other tools.
sure.
And we often don't talk about that. And so I remember just being because I was raised Southern Baptist, still Southern Baptist, and so we don't really talk about those other gifts, right? A lot of
Sure.
times, and also being a woman, like sometimes that can be difficult too in the ministry space. So I remember thinking like maybe my calling's preaching, and then like asking if that was even like a legitimate calling for me, and being told that I couldn't. Now I don't believe that anymore necessarily, and obviously everybody has their own belief system around that, but I was like, okay, God, if this isn't it, then what is it? I need you to show it to me. And just being very like adamant that I wanted to know what God was calling me to at a very young age.
Hmm.
So I was probably 12 when I was really just trying my best to like figure out what was God wanting me to do with my life. And at the same time, I was developing websites and I loved graphic design and I loved just online community, even though I didn't know what that was at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't defined. Digital marketing wasn't a thing yet in 2002 ish, when I was thinking about all these things. Like all this is really new. And so at the same time, I was I was leading a Harry Potter forum online, and which is kind of funny. A lot of people are like Harry Potter. I loved Harry Potter. I was a kid, and nobody else talked
Sure.
about it in my community because it was heretical, maybe a little bit at the time. But I really enjoyed it. It was something I was really passionate about as a kid, and so I am every parent's worst nightmare. I went online trying to find friends, and I found like 5,000 of them in this forum that I created, in this community that I created online through, it's funny, kind of through an Australian Harry Potter fan site, which is really fun, right? So it was an
Oh, that checks out. Yeah, of course. Right.
it was an international thing. I was internationally working with a distributed team in 2002 as a 12-year-old. So yeah, it was quite
Oh,
the
that's
journey.
awesome.
Yeah, for me and my calling, because that played a pivotal role, because that's when I realized like these are real people like behind these
Yeah.
screens, and I really loved them and I really cared. They were my friends just as much as my friends in real life. And it's so funny because I think a lot of people imagine that I was a kid behind a screen 24/7 that had no social life. I was also president of every club at my high school when I graduated. So here we are today. I had a full and very fulfilling social life outside of the internet. But at the same time, I had friends from the internet that I loved and cared about and prayed for and wanted them to come to
Oh,
know Christ too. And so actually that's part of the first chapter of this book that I wrote, was just about like why I was called. Is I felt from a very early age that, I wanted to share the gospel through technology, whatever that means was. And that's what I've kind of been doing ever since, is figuring out new ways that we could share the gospel and create community that matters and help people feel not so alone and
hmm,
can feel connected and have a sense of belonging and all those things, because they're really important. Like life change happens in the context of relationship. If we don't have relationships with people, we cannot lead them to Christ.
yeah, that's right. I love that. Um, you were preaching right there to me. I'm here for all of it. I was getting ready to pass the offering plate.
But I'm not a preacher. So.
um, okay, so I know that we're going to jump into church communications today. That's your
Sure.
latest resource out, and we're going to talk about all of that. And there's somebody listening right now who's on the treadmill or on the elliptical
Good for them.
who is like, Tony, Katie, like that sounds great, but I'm not really, I'm not in church leadership. I am just an average, everyday
Person.
person who's barely making it to church. I'm going 1.6 times a month. You know, like I when I'm not there, I catch most of the message online, but I fast forward through the worship, and these are my people, right? So I'm hoping that you could tell them why they should care about church communications when they don't work for, nor do they ever have any intention of working for a church.
Okay, excellent. Actually, I really love this question. Never been asked this question, and it's something I think I'm super passionate about. Is the normal average member in a church who goes once a month, like typically,
Yeah.
like you have the best position to share the gospel more than anyone, probably at more than the pastor does. Okay, because like a pastor, they have to earn the respect of all these people. You have earned the respect and friendship of so many people that don't even know that you follow Christ, right? So how do we use your life as a ministry online is the next question that I want to pose. So like when I think about like the average churchgoer, I think about like my mom. Okay, so my mom goes to church maybe once a month as well, and she was super involved at one point in her life, and it has less involved in her retirement. But I think about like the fact that she has so many friends online. Every time she posts, she gets like 40, 50 likes. People comment, people are interested in what she's doing in her life, and that's the same for everyone across the board. Like
Mm.
everybody's interested in what you personally are doing. That's like the whole point of social media. It is social, it is a conversation. And so, how can we encourage more conversations in our churches? I used to tell people it'd be great if from the pulpit we could encourage our congregants to like share the gospel online. But how do we do that without just being weird and hokey, right? So, because like it's almost like being on a street corner yelling again, or like passing out a tract. Like, and that's not relational. Okay, at the end of the day, it's just
Yeah.
not. And so, what I want to see more of is literally just asking the question, "What can I be praying for you?"
Hmm.
That's it. Just ask it more frequently. Ask it on your just Facebook wall. Ask it when you tweet. Ask it on Instagram. Send it in DMs. Like send it as a direct message to people, and be consistent about it and follow up and actually write out your prayer for them. Not because you're being show off, but because Jesus modeled prayer for us, and I think we should model prayer for others. So because they're going to read that prayer and they're going to read it over themselves. And a
Mm.
lot of times they don't know what to pray, but seeing what other people have prayed helps them understand like what they can be praying for, right? I don't think it's a show off thing. I think it's really a personal thing. I think we've really lost the power, like not lost the power of prayer, but like it is so incredibly powerful, and it's so incredibly relational. Like God gave us this gift to talk to him so we can be in relationship with him, but also so that we can be in relationship with others, right? And talk to him about what other people need and bring to him those requests as well. I think it's such a powerful thing to think about communities praying for one another and how can we encourage more. I think prayer is the primary strategy for sharing the gospel. So how do we increase that?
Yeah, I love that answer, and I think people are always generally surprised when they post how can I pray for you and all the number of responses that they will
Mhm.
get.
People will come out of
It
the woodwork for it. I've had people contact me that I haven't seen since kindergarten to ask for prayer after I post it. Now, here's the thing: if you're not posting it, people aren't going to straight up just tell you what they can
right.
be praying. Like they're not going to just. But they're waiting. They're waiting for the invitation, right? Like just to tell someone like something hard that they're going through, and they don't have maybe anyone. Loneliness is like an epidemic right now. I mean, it could be its own pandemic outside of the pandemic. Because, like, I think it was like 1 in 4 people were lonely
Mm.
before the pandemic. Like, Cigna had done a study that 1 in 4 people, like, didn't have someone that they felt that they could talk to, like, personally, like, really connect. Is that not the saddest thing that has, I mean,
Yeah.
it should be breaking our hearts here in the North American church to think that there are people in our communities that feel like they have absolutely no one they can turn to.
Yeah. So help us develop an appropriate. I'm going to use the word theology, but appropriate kind of posture when it comes to our online presence, right? So like most people, I have Facebook, I have
Mhm.
Instagram, I actually have Snapchat and TikTok
Mhm.
because I really care about the next generation, and I feel like that's where they are, right? And but there's somebody listening right now who's like, well, I've got Facebook and Instagram, or even just Facebook, and what when you think about it from a Jesus theological standpoint, do you think, okay, this is my table, this is my megaphone? Like, give us some imagery around what this is in the season of life that we're in. Because I think that, obviously the digital world is not going away, it's not changing. Um, but maybe how the church and how the individual Christian uses it should.
Yeah, so social media is not a billboard. It is very much a conversation. So, yeah, I would think of it more as a table. What's crazy is that we're more connected than we've ever been, but more lonely also than we've ever been
Sure.
as a
Yeah.
society. It's kind of insane because like we don't actually have to have conversations with each other to keep up with each other, right? Like today my best friend posted, a new some pictures of her kids going to school, and it's not like she had to send those to me personally. I just saw them, liked them, and said, "Hey, love that," and that was it, right? She didn't have to call me and tell me about her kid's first day of school. And that you lose something there, right? Like you lose that whole conversation that could have led to more conversations that would have led to maybe us talking about, church or more meaningful things, right? And so when we live in this world, like where do we go from here is
Hmm.
I think how do we redirect it, right? So social media at the end of the day is just a tool. And I think it is a tool that we can utilize to think about how our lives are being displayed for others. And I think use it as a way to promote authenticity, like not just showing like how pretty and perfect your family is, but also sharing, some things that you're going through as well, but also using it as a tool to, share the burden with others, like so when you can see that other people are dealing with things, sending them a message and saying, hey, like what can I be praying for you again, is just like literally sometimes the easiest thing you can do, and you don't have to like necessarily go out and start a GoFundMe tomorrow, but those things matter, to people. And so how do we just start more relationships, and then not just start more relationships but go deeper into those relationships instead of just, I don't know, having on the surface relationships, right?
Yeah, that I think that checks my experience too, right? It's if it's only about posting the things that I want people to see about me, then it's not very social, and nor is it very life giving. It's just more, it
Yeah,
feels like an obligation
for sure.
of sorts. Um,
I actually could talk a little bit more about that. Like when it comes to authenticity, for example, last December, uh, I was dealing with major depression and anxiety. I have panic disorder, which I inherited. It's nothing of my own fault that I have panic disorder.
sure.
It is an inherited condition. My grandmother had it, my mom had it, and now I have it. However, I have a choice in how I'm going to deal with it differently, right? Because medication and stuff like that just didn't exist, right?
Yeah.
Especially when they were going through the thick of it in their 30s, which was the same for both of them, by the way. Very odd, but it came around at the same age, and it was existent, and so I knew it was coming. And then I was dealing with it so hardcore in December that like in therapy my charts were just off the charts for how depressed and anxious I was. And then I had my first ever like suicidal thoughts that I had ever had in my life, and thought like it's insane, and I need to talk to someone, I need
Hmm.
some help. Thankfully I've worked totally past that, and I'm totally on the other side of it. Like I am doing great, medication's been fantastic, counseling has helped. But at that time it was so incredibly difficult. However, what I did this past year is I actually shared those screenshots of my charts of them being off the chart, and just a picture of like how I felt that day. And just like that, it is incredibly hard, right? Like you can think
Hmm.
somebody's life is picture perfect, because at the time mine definitely seemed that it was probably then. and they can be dealing with a completely different situation. And I've had so many people reach out to tell me, and not reach out through me. It's so funny. They haven't really reached out to me via social media or like even text, but every time people have seen me in person who haven't seen me in a while. So maybe they've only seen me like once in the last year. When they see me, they go immediately and they say, I am so grateful you posted that because I felt the same in this last year.
Oh,
And
wow.
I am so grateful that you just put it out there and said the truth about how you were feeling. I think so many people are navigating these really tough feelings coming out of this pandemic. And it's okay because it's traumatic, right? It was very traumatic what we all went through together. I completely changed jobs and careers, and a lot of people did that. And so I think it's worth talking about those things and expressing those feelings and opening up a little bit online so that you can start conversations with people that matter, right?
Yeah, I think that that's beautiful, and I really appreciate your vulnerability there. Um, as I heard you talking about that, one of the thoughts that I had was a friend of mine who who is, I'm not going to use the word vulnerable. As a matter of fact, he's somewhat aggressive in his sharing of his political leanings
Mm,
and how he thinks about the world.
sure.
I'm wondering if you could coach us, the reclamation community here, on how to use the breadth of social media for the Jesus stuff and for the political stuff, if we should be using it for the political stuff at all. Like what's the right what's the right balance here?
Well, my this is for me personally. I don't think this is for everyone. I think this is for me, but I think gosh, there's so much hardship in the world. There's so much bad in the world. I'm not going to add to it online. So for
Yeah.
me, the internet is a place to spread kindness and goodness and share stories of life change and what God is doing. And yeah, of course share like some stuff that you're going through because you know it's going to help others, right? But to me like especially politics, it's not very helpful to a lot of people. You honestly get into more fights than you do good online, especially. And so I save those personal conversations for like actually in person, and so that we can have like more of a dialogue. So I mean, not that you can't have hard conversations online. I definitely think that you can, but I just think that I would prefer, for me personally, to share the good news and to share like kindness and spread positivity. And because we just got enough. We've just had too much in the last couple of years. Like I'm done with that. Like I just want to spread positivity. And if I see other people doing that, I don't really partake in it. I don't have any interest in being that person anymore. Like, or I never was really. I try to avoid drama like the plague. And so, I think that just causes more strife than it does good sometimes.
No, I like that. I like the idea about setting up ground rules for the internet. Like if you were going over to someone's house, like before we would go over to someone's house for a dinner party, mom would be like, "Hey, whatever you do, don't talk about X, Y, and Z because we're
Right.
not putting our family's drama out there." And
Yeah,
so
and
I
it's
think,
not necessary, right? Like, it's not necessary to make your grandpa
right,
upset about the grass. I don't know, or whatever he hates.
right, right,
Like
right.
it's not necessary. Like we can just avoid it and like not talk about it. And we can tell grandpa about how much we love I don't know, the Golden Girls or something. I don't know. We can talk
Right, right, right.
completely and have a nice, cordial conversation that can lead to having more meaningful, impactful conversations and just avoid the drama and the negativity. Like, there's just there's no space for it in my personal life. And I don't make space for it on the internet either. Like, you're never going to hardly hear any of that stuff from me, like, even personally, like, when we're just sitting, like, I'm probably not going to bring up politics to somebody on the street, honestly. I'm not going to do it on the internet either. Yeah.
Um, I, I love this new resource that you have out, and one of the things I love to do with books is read the dedication pages, right? And so you've got a fairly robust dedication page,
Currently.
which is great. I don't mean that in a bad way. I hope it didn't.
No,
I
no,
didn't
I
mean for
know
it.
it's lengthy. It's so funny, but I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to do this again. So I'm just going to put it all out there.
Well, I'd like to read it because I think it's beautiful. I think it's well written.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to I'm gonna let you comment on it. It says, to my mom who took me to church and cooked for and fed those who came every Sunday, without whom churchcommunications.com would not be a reality today. For my late father who told me that getting a business degree would help the church. My brother and his wife, my biggest fans and constant sources of friendship. My friends who always said I would write a book one day and never doubted. My business partner, Kenny, who never gave up on our dream of serving thousands of churches worldwide. And to you, church communicator, for giving me a chance.
Oh, isn't that
Um,
meaningful?
it is
Makes me want
meaningful.
to touch it, like tear up. I'm like, oh yeah, like that's so yeah, no, it gives me the goosebumps just hearing it read. So yeah, no, thanks for resharing it with me. I know you had some questions. Sorry, I just like
No, it's good. So my question is how important is the balance? Because that's community. What you just talked about here is community,
yeah.
and what we're going to talk about online is community and
Mhm.
the church communicator. How important is the balance between tangible, like moms, dads, and brothers and friends in real flesh,
Yeah.
and the 30,000 people in your Facebook group friends?
Well, those 30,000 people matter to me. Now, do they matter
Yeah, no, and
to you?
yeah, I mean, obviously everyone matters, right? Like,
Right. Yeah,
how do we live in that tension?
it's so funny. So I actually figured out, or I'd seen a TED talk on parasocial relationships. Have you ever heard of this term, parasocial relationships?
Mm,
So it's a term you use with fictional characters, but I think it's also come to be a term that you use with influencers, which is very odd that that's what I've become. I acknowledge that that is weird. But like, so what that means is essentially these people, even if I don't personally know them, a lot of them feel that like they personally know me,
sure.
which is why I said, like, thank you for giving me a chance, because at the time I was a 24-year-old kid when I started this. And,
Oh yeah.
I think about it and I was just like a wee child navigating the internet, hoping that somebody would listen to someone who I felt like John in the wilderness for the last, 15 years of my life, like make
Yeah.
way for the Lord on the internet, just with like wild hair and honey and locusts. Like, I'm just like out
Look,
there. Like,
sackcloth.
yeah.
I'm just sitting over here typing in my
I
sackcloth.
know, like I felt like that though, because like people were like, the internet, like they were like, the internet and the gospel. Like that might eventually, and then COVID happened, right? And it was so crazy how like automatically that opinion really changed about how, like church can exist on the internet. But
Mm,
I do think about like my dad. So I said like he told me, so it's funny, before I went to college I'd wanted to study religion, I'd wanted to go to seminary, and my dad was very adamant that I not do that. Which is so funny. He was very like, no, that kid, you can still serve the church, but you're going to do it differently, which was so prophetic. Before he passed, right before I went to college actually.
oh,
And
wow, I'm
so
sorry.
I said, okay, I'm going to stick with it then. And so I did. I stuck with like studying computers and technology and stuff like that. And it really has served the church incrementally more than anything I could have ever studied. Not that, theology isn't important, guys, because it definitely is. However, you can study it on your own. If you would like. So, and that's what I've done, right? And I was really lucky. I was personally discipled from a very young age by a deacon in my church, and also I was licensed to ministry at 18 in my church,
Hmm.
which is a big deal, I think, for a Southern Baptist church to do. I don't know if there was any other woman that was licensed in ministry before me, and so it was, yeah. I mean, I think that I'm just very fortunate to have had all these connections and all this stuff that's kind of worked out for like God's glory at the end of the day. Like, it's nothing about me. It's just I've been very fortunate and God has been very good.
And so let's drill down a little bit on the tension between the two, right? So managing an online group, creating real community, which is what you've done really
Sure,
well,
yeah.
you know, um, and then your friends and family who obviously love you and have poured into you, and
Yeah.
how do you know? I mean, because that both sides of that discussion can become all consuming. How do you live in that tension?
Okay, the tension between like having the online community. So it's what's interesting is that online community, it can be so great. Like I love actually meeting these people in person, like at conferences and those kind of things. And then the other side of the coin is, trolls, right? Like you have people who are just going to naturally be not the best on the internet, and that they would
Mm,
say things about you that they wouldn't say to your face online.
sure.
And yeah, that hurts. It is not, that doesn't like just, I wish it went off of me like water. It does not. Like it sticks to me, and it has gosh, for years. So, I've been doing this for a long time, so I have a thicker skin than I used to. I used to take things so personally. But at the same time, like, gosh, there are so many people online that I can think of right now, like Katrina, who's in my group, or Karina, or Jeanette, or Marcy, or so many wonderful people like Peter Inglet, who's at a church in Rochester, New York, and they're all over the world, but yet I am so lucky to have a relationship with them at all and be able to help them and talk to them about what their church is going through and needs. And I do consider them to be friends in some kind of way. Like I get calls from them, I get texts from them just like I would anybody else. Now, do I of course have like a normal personal life? Yeah. And to be fair, like a lot of my friends that are close to me have absolutely no idea about any of this stuff that's going, like they don't love me.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Like they don't know anything. Like they're like excited that I like launched a book, but like, did any of them text me? No. Like they, what I'm saying? Like they're
Right,
not, like
right.
they're like, whatever. This is what Katie does. Like they're like, it's fine. But do they care about that? For me, no. Which honestly is so relieving. Like they don't put my worth and value in all these things that I'm doing online. Um, I am just a normal human friend to them that exists, which is really great, because I kind of need that safe space to just exist sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think that's good wisdom, right? The you have one group over here and one group over there, and they both exist, and they're both valuable, and
Mhm.
they both hold different parts of your life. And I don't know, that feels like um,
Which a lot of
balance
us
to
do
me.
that with work, right? Like a lot of us
Yeah,
have our
of
work
course.
friends, and then our like more close personal friends. There's maybe a couple of people in like my personal life that maybe like my sister-in-law is in the group, but like she's a graphic designer. She worked at a church with me when we worked at church together. So she has some say sometimes, or some questions and stuff. But like honestly, more than anything, she's just proud of me, and we don't really talk about it, which is the
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I love it. Um, I want to get into the book a little bit.
sure.
So I kind of started with a bigger question. I think that most of my listeners would agree with me when I say that the church has the best message in the world. Like
Hmm.
the message of Jesus and all that comes with that is incredible. Why are we so bad at communicating the gospel? What happened? Where'd we go wrong, Katie? Fix us.
I wish I could tell you where we went wrong. It just feels messy, right? Yeah, we have the best message in the world, and yet we're so bad at packaging it. It's like we have a gift and we're like handing it over like still in the shopping bag from Walmart or something, and somebody's like, I don't know if this is like what I want, like, or how I want
Right.
it, like I don't know. Or I think about too, I talk about this a lot of times, and like I have a keynote that I give about online community, and I feel like for the last 30 years, like evangelism became a dirty word, right? And
Yeah.
it's not, right? Like I have a heart for evangelism because I want people to come to know Jesus the way that I do, because I want them to have the same peace and security that I do in knowing someone that I can trust and follow, and try to live my life like, and flip some tables on occasion, and do those kind of things. And so I think though what went wrong maybe a little bit was when we started handing out like tracks. Like we took it away from being a relational thing. The
Yeah.
discipleship process is relational at the end of the day, right? I
Yep.
think about
Amen.
how many times I have heard from so many people that they weren't personally discipled when they came to know Christ, or in their church, they were a number in their church. Nobody really knew them. Therefore, they just like fell off the program because it wasn't about their relationship with someone, and it wasn't about actually having a relationship with Christ. It was about fulfilling things and doing things and earning
Mm,
things. And that's just not what it's about at all. It's about grace, and it's about dignity, and it's about having a relationship with someone and actually showing
yeah,
up and being consistent in someone's life because they matter, not because they're a number.
I'm here for it. That's well, and we talk about how discipleship and disciple making is it's intentional, relational, and reproducible, right? So it's all three of those parts put
But is
together.
it scalable? I don't think so. Like, like I think we got into the
Right.
scalability of it for so
Yeah.
long, and I don't know that it's scalable. I think it really is like it really depends upon a person and a person in that relationship. Like I said, I was so fortunate to have been discipled from a young age by a deacon, the head deacon of my church, who was my sixth grade Sunday school teacher, John Klinner. Okay, so John, I had so many weird questions. I was the worst kid ever, basically, in Sunday school class. I was like, okay, so tell me about propitiation. Okay, like tell me about why does it say this about predestination over here, but this about that over there? Like, tell me everything. Or, like, why did Jesus spend 3 days in the grave? Was three like a specific number? And why does that
Right.
matter? And so I was the worst child possible. And we had the best time exploring the Bible together and just being friends. And it was so great that he was able to pour all that information into me. What was better though is that while John he had answers, he also had more questions for me than he did answers,
Sure.
and really taught me how to look into these things for myself and decide them for myself. Because I don't think we like teach interpretation, like, and that each person who's reading the Bible is interpreting it for themselves, right? And so, which is the whole point of Martin Luther, right? The whole Reformation thing was that we were able to like have this relationship with God, and it could be personal, and you can read the Bible and have this relationship with it as well. And so that's what I loved about my my discipleship relationship with John, was that he let me make up my mind, even if he
Hmm.
disagreed with it, because I could prove it with biblical fact, and then also like it was something worth considering or whatever. And we just had, I don't know, we just had a great time of arguing, of like of discussing, not just arguing. But what's really great is I think that really reminds me of like Jewish rabbis. Like when you become a
Sure.
rabbi, that's literally all you do is like argue about scripture, and like nobody ever comes to a conclusion. Like there is no like this is for certain thought. Like it's very like indescript almost. But I love that process of just struggling through doubt and scripture and figuring out, what do you think this says? What do you think this means? And just working through it with somebody at the end of the day. And you're going to work through these things a million times in your life, right? You're going to read a scripture and it's going to mean
Right.
a different thing 30 years from now than it did today. But having someone at the end of the day that you can call and talk to it about it is like the most important thing. That's, I feel like, where we kind of like threw off, I don't know, things, is we forgot about like mentorship or discipleship, and we really put it into a like, we'll walk through this Bible study together, which is
Right.
good. Like, I'm not saying that's bad. Like, I think that's great, but I would love to see more places where it is encouraged to struggle through doubt and uncertainty and hard questions in Scripture one on one, and at the end of the day, still be friends. And like,
Right. Well, I do think that that's how we solve the disagreement problem that we have online is we practice it in person, one on one on two. I feel very passionately that every person who works in a church should tithe their week in disciple making relationships.
mm,
Right. And so
that's
I'd
good.
like to see,
Tide your time.
if I was, yeah, tithe your time. Right. And then also on knowing that it's not a spiritual gift, that everyone has to, it's
Yeah,
part of our Christian identity.
sure.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, yeah, we make it something to do and to check off, and like, hey, I taught Sunday school
Right.
for 5 years, so I'm good. Like God's good with me. And
And now I don't have to do anything else, right?
which, and
Right. And now I'm
you don't have to mentor anyone. I mean, you know what I'm saying,
right.
technically, but like, man, what a joy it is to have a relationship with someone that you can like go back. And I have that relationship still with students that I was teaching to this day. Like they'll send me, questions, or they'll send me TikToks or something about like religious stuff. And we watched actually some Bible study stuff together online and like talked about it afterwards. And like what a joy it is to just like discuss it and like at the
Mm,
end of the day say, hey, we may not come to the same conclusion, and that's okay.
yeah.
But like as long as we're both following Jesus and like we hold these truths to be concrete, that Jesus is the Son of God, all these other things that really matter, then the rest of it's fair game. Let's just have fun learning, right? Like let's
Right.
have fun
That's
just
right. I think
enjoying the
that's right.
experience outside of the concrete things.
So one of the things I appreciate about the way that you wrote this book is that you use very current and very workplace centered terms to talk about church communications, branding, digital marketing, public relations, project management, those kind of things.
Sure.
I think that there's probably somebody listening who has the church in this box where it's like, man, the church doesn't need branding help. Or does the church really need a social media strategy, or shouldn't we just be teaching the Bible? Or I'm wondering if you could kind of give us the why someone should pick up this book and read it for their church.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing: your church absolutely doesn't need any of these things. Like, if your church does it, like, fantastic, good for you. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and try to like sell you a book because I don't think that's necessary. If you don't think it's necessary for y'all, like my church. So the church I grew up in definitely had no branding, had no social media, had no website. Today does it? Yeah, kind of, but not really. They're still just serving their community now. I mean, have they like? But they're serving their community. Like that's really all I think
Sure.
they have great relationships. Those people still love me. I come home and Linda McCraw still kisses me on the face, and I still have to avoid it. And it's something that I love, right? Like that to me
Right.
matters. Okay,
Right.
but at the same
Linda's
time,
coming in hot. Here we go.
like, can we share the gospel and make it more clear and hopefully even make it go further because of like communication strategies that are now well learned in the business world? Absolutely, we can. Is it completely necessary? No, like the Holy Spirit's the only thing that's necessary, like to bring the growth or whatever. Like
Mm,
I don't need to like tell you that. But do these things work and help? Yeah, of course they work and help. And so branding for like a church, it's just to me, it's about making something memorable, right? And so, and like, what is the, when somebody thinks of your church, like, what is the taste that's left in their mouth? Like,
yeah.
we want to make sure that like the taste and see that the Lord is good is like cohesive across. And so I think there's so many religions that do this really well. And then I feel like, with churches, we've kind of like sometimes missed the mark. Some are excellent at it, some are like, eh. And like I said, whatever you're doing, like Jesus already loves it and approves and thinks is fantastic. So don't hear me say that. But at the same time, like, can we do this as well? For sure. So branding is just something that helps people remember who you are, where you are, like what you believe in a quick way, right?
Yeah.
It's a word mark. It's something that helps people be recognized around that community, around that church, around the organization, whatever it might be. And there's a lot more things that go into branding than just a logo. I think people automatically think of logos, but sounds, jingles. There's like so phrases that people say. There's so many things that actually go into a brand more so than just like when I worked at a church, part of our brand was actually something our pastor would say every Sunday. He would say, hear, believe it, and live after like reading the scripture. And he still says it. And that's part of our brand because he says it every week. And so your church might
Right.
end in go in grace and peace to love and serve the Lord. That is part of your brand because you're saying it every week. And so you probably already have a brand. Now, whether or not it is all together, then that's a different question. And I think this book can help you bring it all together, at least if you are frustrated that it's not.
Yeah, I think the way to think about something like this is that this is a tool to enhance what God is already doing in and through your ministry.
Right.
And if you're brave enough to put in the work, I mean, not the work is hard because it forces us to admit, right? When you do communication well, it forces us to admit where we're not communicating well, right?
Yeah,
Am I
and it
wrong in
takes
that?
time. Like I know it's
Yeah.
work. Like it takes time, it takes effort. Like and if you're a pastor of a church and you are the only person on staff, like, can you gain something from this book? Like, absolutely you can, but don't feel like you have to implement every single thing out of it. Like, please just maybe walk away with like how to do SEO a little bit better for your church website so people can find you easier. Like,
Right.
like the little things can matter and pay off in big ways, right? Because that's what really matters is just finding those people who are far from the Lord. How do we find them? And today, a lot of that starts online because they're Googling questions or they're asking their friends or they're going into Facebook and reading people's profiles and, seeing like, oh, I don't want to be associated with that person because they are like this on the internet. And if they're like that on the internet, then I don't want to go to their church.
It's so true. It's such a reflection. It's the new lobby. I don't know. I think our digital footprint
Yeah.
is the new lobby of the church, and one way or another, people are going to see it.
Yeah, for sure.
My community loves to pray, and as this book continues to kind of go out into the wilderness, what's the what can we be praying for this book?
Yeah, I think that it just reaches the right people that it needs to reach. I think there are so many people who are struggling with a lot of these ideas, especially after COVID. Like, should we keep this? Should we keep doing that? Do we need to do more? What should we be
Mm-hmm.
doing? And so I hope that it gives them direction. And I hope that it clears up some answers or some questions that they have, gives them some answers to questions that they have. More than anything, I hope that it helps them find the community that they need. If they feel lonely in communications for churches, they can always join our group. Like, I hope that they can find that community with us if they need to. I think that's why I started the group to begin with, is because I knew that ministry was extremely lonely. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, one more question to ask, but before I ask it, I know that my listeners are going to want to find you all over the interwebs. Where is the best place to learn all things Katie?
Yeah, you can go to churchcommunications.com. You can also go to katieallred.com. If you're interested in the book, it's churchcommunications.com/book. I'm sure he'll probably put it in the show notes regardless. And then also, we have a conference coming up at the end of September. And so we'd love to see you there if you would like to come. It's in Nashville, and you can find that also on the website.
Great. And we will link to all that in the show notes. And we'll also link to the Facebook group in the show notes too, if you want to get connected there. So we'll throw a link in there as well. Okay, last question I always love to ask people. It's an advice question. I'm going to ask you
Mm,
to give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life that you're in when you give said advice.
okay.
So I'm going to take you back to the day after you started that online Harry Potter group, that international, huge Harry Potter group. And of course, it wasn't huge when you started, but if you could pull up a chair in front of that young lady, sit knee to knee with her, hold her hands, and look her in the eyes, what's the one thing that you're going to tell her?
Uh, this is going to matter more.
Hmm.
Yeah, I didn't think anything of it until really recently in my life. I completely skipped over thinking about it in college or how it affected me in grad school. And then I really realized I was like, this is what God was doing this whole time. But I wish I could like go back and maybe think about it differently, or like I wrote some about it, but obviously I was a kid, so my writing about it was very like elementary at times. But it was such a journey, and I think if I could go back, I'd love to just tell myself it was going to matter.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's good. That's very wise. Katie, thank you so much for your generosity today, for your time, for what you're doing for the kingdom, online and in person, and for all the leaders who you're going to impact through this book. I'm super thankful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony, for having me. I appreciate it.